What is up everybody, Scratch coming up with another Raid Shadow Legends video. In this video we're gonna talk about the best poisoners in the entire game. I feel like a lot of you guys tend to get confused when we're talking about poisoners, which one is the best for that specific team, why would I use this champion for that particular team. So today we're gonna try to throw it out there, which are the best poisoners to use in your clan boss team, regardless if the clan boss team is unkillable, high defense team, non-unkillable, 2-to-1 ratio, or God knows what other sort of team you can use out there. So we're not gonna rank them like number 1, 2, 3, 4, because again, it's very particular and depends by the rest of the champions that you're using in your team. So we can't really say that champion is the best, even though it's clear which is the best champion in this particular section here. So we're gonna give the number 1 spot to that specific champion because it just deserves it. But rather than that, we're not gonna go like number 2, 3, 4, etc. We're gonna start by faction. So usually we're going from the top here, guys, but this time around we're gonna go the other way around. So we're gonna start from the bottom ones, checking every single faction, right? So talking about the Shadow King, Toragi the Frog is decent. Is not a bad champion, but it's not something I would call a very good poisoner, right? So he's not gonna make it into the very top champions there. In the dwarves, nothing really stands out here as a poisoner, as a good champion to fill that role. In the Night Revenants, on the other hand, we do have a couple of very good champions to say like this. They are pretty particular with the teams you're running, so we're gonna talk about that as well. But first we're gonna start with Narma the Return. She's a newish champion. I think it's like, what, half a year old, something like that. I just wish she would have higher multiplier. She doesn't hit too hard. She doesn't deal a ton of damage, just like raw damage. She has pretty good base stats, so she can work great on a defense team. She can work amazing on a 2-to-1 ratio team as well. Unkillable team, not so much necessarily, but if you have nothing else better than her, definitely she can fill up the role. So the A1 attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of increasing the duration of 3 random debuffs on the target by 1 turn. Decent, nothing near Vizier, she's not at that strong level, but this one right here attacks one enemy, 100% chance to place decrease attack for 3 turns, that's on a 3-turn cooldown as well. Also heals all allies by 15% of this champion's max HP. The heal increases by 2% for each poison debuff on the target. So basically you can get up to like, what, 7 more, right? So 14% more heal, so almost 30% of this champion's max HP for the whole team. So because of it, you can kind of give her tons of HP next to her defense. Don't focus on attack, crit rate, crit damage, how I said, because she doesn't deal tons of damage, and like that you get to heal your team for quite a bit. On the A3, attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance of placing 3 5% poison debuffs and a 25% poison sensitivity debuff for 3 turns. That's on a 4-turn cooldown, so because of this skill right here, she will be much better on a 2-to-1 ratio. Or pair her with another champion, Vizier. I know her A1 kind of tends to say that, but she's not able to keep the debuffs up even with ally attack or counter attack. Her aura increases ally accuracy in dungeons by 80. So not the best aura out there for clan boss for sure. We have Tomb Lord as well on the other hand here, guys. So Tomb Lord by its own is not a great poisoner, right? He's not bad, but he's not the best because the poisons are only for 1 turn. But if you do decide to pair him with a Vizier, for example, if you do have a Vizier, of course, landing 4 poisons from here is pretty good. Giant Slayer on the A1, that's absolutely amazing. Giant Slayer brings up a ton of damage, and then you have defense down and attack down on the A3, guys. This is for arena battles, the aura, so it's not really gonna help us. How I said, base stats, if I said it, I can remember, are pretty good. The base stats, decent defense, decent amount of HP, decent amount of attack, but mainly you get these poisons if the hit is critical. Has a 100% chance fully booked to place 4 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 1 turn. Decrease speed doesn't work against the clan boss, but we have attacks one enemy 3 times. That's what makes it so good. And decrease attack and decrease defense. How I said, pair with the Vizier, Tomb Lord can be a pretty good poisoner for clan boss. On its own, not as good because of the poisons being there only for one turn, right? Moving over to the next faction, and that is the Dark Elves. Back in the day, people used to run Cold Heart. Like, I was like, I want to get a Cold Heart as well. That was more than 2 years ago. Like, literally, when the game was new, we didn't have like tons and tons of legendary champions and epic champions to fill these roles. Cold Heart was a very strong champion for Clan Boss, but she's been power creeped when we're talking about Clan Boss. Then KL, not the best poisoners out there, but is your starter. So if you don't have a different poisoner there, you can definitely run KL as a poisoner. The main poisoner I do want to talk about from this faction, guys, is Xayvia. So Xayvia, she just rocks. Now that they fixed the AI, so she's no longer using the A3 on the Clan Boss, on Oro. For unkillable teams, high defense teams not so much, because how you guys can see, she's pretty squishy. 750 base defense is not amazing. But again, we do have a Giant Slayer on the A1. We have a double hit on the A2, so she has a what? She has a 40% chance to land a 5% poison. With Masteries can go up to 45%. And on the A2, we have a 75% chance fully booked to place a 5% poison for 2 turns. Attacks all enemies 2 times, so every single hit. Or with Masteries, we get to go to 80%. Because she's not wasting the poisons with the A3 anymore, she actually becomes a very viable poisoner for Oro as well. I used to manual with Xayvia back in the day as well. And man, was a pain to manual Clan Boss every single day for every single difficulty. Her defense is pretty low. She has good attack, good HP, but we all know defense is very, very important for Clan Boss. Good amount of speed, and she hits pretty hard as well. So definitely not a sleeper if you have Xayvia to run the role of a poisoner in there. That's about it for this faction. And that, here we actually have quite a few champions that are definitely worth it to be shouted out here. So we have Frozen Banshee, we have a Grave Chill Killer. Grave Chill Killer, she's more situational if you pair her with Frozen Banshee or with Narma the Return, for example. But the main one here is Frozen Banshee. I feel like she's a rare champion, but she's one of the best poisoners in the entire game, guys. So crazy good base stats like 1000 defense, almost 15k HP, 1k attack, and then we have the A1, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 100% chance fully booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns if the target is under a poison sensitivity debuff. Then the A2 doesn't get used on Clan Boss, so for whoever is not familiar with it, because I know a lot of you guys are still asking this question, will this Termiter increase affect the rotation of the team? She's actually not using the A2 on Clan Boss, so that's absolutely awesome. So she's only using the A3 and A2. The A3 attacks one enemy, places a 25% poison sensitivity debuff for 2 turns, and that's on a 3-turn cooldown as well. The only problem with Frozen Banshee, of course she can run on unkillable, on non-unkillable teams. The only problem with her is if she gets resisted for this with the A3, she won't be landing any poisons for quite a few turns because she won't be able to land poisons without poison sensitivity. So that's kind of like my only complaint regarding Frozen Banshee. Now, Grave Chill Killer, how I said, she just deserves a shout out there. Then we have Anax. Decent base stats. 800 defense is not really gonna cut it too good for a non-unkillable team. We have on the A1 defense down, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 35% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense for 2 turns. The A2 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 100% chance fully booked of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff and a 5% poison debuff for 3 turns. That's on a 3-turn cooldown fully booked. On the A3, attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance of placing a weakened debuff for 2 turns, heals this champion by 50% of the damage inflicted. Now this champion right here has pretty crazy multipliers. On the passive right here, that's kind of like throws him out of some of the teams because it's pretty hard to tune him in. Places a 60% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns when their HP drops below 75%. Places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns when their HP drops below 50%. And the active effect grants an extra turn when this champion's HP drops below 10%. So whenever that's gonna happen, guys, he's just randomly gonna get the turn. So he's definitely good for bad hitter as well. You just gotta change the teams completely on the team, but it's better to run him on a block damage team, for example, because as long as he has block damage, his HP is never gonna get down to 10%. So he will never get that extra turn, and because of it, you'll be able to go in a straight line with him. But talking about high defense teams, this right here is not really gonna screw you over, because whenever he's gonna drop so much HP, he's gonna be near death. He might get an extra turn, survive another cycle, but rather than that, he won't be on for 50 extra turns just to mess up the rotation every single time, so nothing to worry about that. But that was Next right here. We do have a couple more badass champions in this faction, guys. We have Nitril right here, one of the best Giant Slayer poisoners in the entire game. He might be the best actually for Giant Slayer. So we have the A1, fully booked, attacks one enemy 3 times, has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff. So because of it, I think it's the higher chance on a Giant Slayer A1 to land poisons. 50% without the masteries, that can go up to 55%. The A2 attacks all enemies, decreases, places a stun, decreases speed, so nothing regarding the clan boss. And same with this one right here, attacks all enemies, decreases the turn meter by 75% chance. Basically, all you care about Nitril is the A1. He definitely has much better base defense than Anex. Good attack, good HP. With a counter-attack team, even with a non-counter-attack team, but with ally attack or just counter-attack from masteries, he still has the better option of landing poisons with the A1 and hitting Giant Slayers at the same time. So I think Nitril better than Xavier on this department, I would say so. Plus better stats as well from him. Multiplayer-wise, I think they're pretty equal. Badel Khazar, the next one, guys. Amazing aura, poisons, heal, everything you would want to have from a support champion. Badel Khazar delivers. So the A1 attacks all enemies, heals this champion and all allies by 20% of the damage inflicted. Now this heal right here is not going to be like out of the roof. You can give him full crit rate if your gear allows you. I wouldn't necessarily run him for a lot of unkillable teams. There are some particular unkillable teams that can make a use of him as being a cleanser as well, rather than just a poisoner and healer. But rather than that, mainly for high defense teams. We have the A2 Malice, removes all debuffs from all allies, places 2 15% continuous heals buffs on all allies for 2 turns, places 2 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns. Return cooldown right here, cleans, poisons, that's what makes him pretty badass. And not just that, but we have the passive, all allies inflict 20% more damage against targets under poison debuffs. And the aura increases ally crit rate in all battles by 25%. That's pretty huge, but that is Badel Khazar, guys. Moving over to the next faction. We have the demon spawns, the orcs. Nothing really stands out there, nothing that can be called a good poisoner, at least not at the moment. So we're gonna jump straight to the skinwalkers, guys. We do have Taurus right here. He's a bit different from the rest of the champions, but that doesn't mean that you cannot run him on clan boss. So the A1 attacks one enemy, heals by 20% of the damage inflicted if the target has a poison debuff. So kind of like he can heal himself a bit from here. Then we have the A2, attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance of placing a weaken debuff for 2 turns. That's on a 3-turn cooldown, so pretty good skill right there. The A3, Toxic Nova, that's on a 4-turn cooldown, fully booked. This champion receives damage equal to 99% of their current HP and places an unkillable buff on this champion for 2 turns. Has an 80% chance, 100% chance fully booked of placing 4 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns. Now, this skill right here is on a 4-turn cooldown. That's kind of like the only thing I don't like as much, but he can definitely be used in a clan boss teams. He can be used as a stun taker as well in some teams, as long as you manage to fix the HP levels on the team. Increases ally accuracy in faction creeps by 40. Taurus, not a bad poisoner overall. Then we have Steel Skull. I still feel like he should be getting a bit of a fixture with his AI, at least, to use the cleans on the right champion. That would actually make him to be used in more teams. We have a pretty low chance of landing poisons from the A1. Attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 35% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Then we have removes all debuffs from a target ally, then heals them by 40%. That's on a 3-turn cooldown. This one right here, it doesn't work properly. Sometimes he's using it, sometimes he's not. So if he would use this to actually cleanse the stun. He would be pretty badass. Then places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns, heals all allies by 20% of their max HP. And that's on a 4 turn cooldown, so it's gonna be pretty hard to make him work on a 4-to-3 ratio and to match this to cleanse the stun, only if you get lucky and not to book the skill, you know. Increases ally defense in faction creeps by 27%. Pretty good base stats, definitely an amazing speed, 111, 16k HP, 958 defense, so he's decent. I used to run Steel Skull in my team for quite a long time, so I'm not gonna say no to it. Early on, to mid game, that's kind of like when you're transitioning from a brutal to nightmare, to say like this. I feel like he still has a place there if you don't have any other better champions. If you don't have a man-eater to make an unkillable team, definitely Steel Skull can be part of that. Then we have Fane, the Ratatouille. Now she's better for unkillable teams, especially the ones 2-to-1 ratio. She has super low base defense. That's kind of the only thing that doesn't make her so viable for a regular clan boss teams. The A1 attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of stealing 5% of the target's meter. That's not gonna work on clan boss. The A2 attacks 1 enemy, has a 100% chance of placing 2 5% poison debuffs and a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. That's on a 3 turn cooldown. And then we have the A3, attacks 1 enemy 3 times. The first hit has a 100% chance fully booked of placing a defense down for 3 turns. The second hit has a 100% chance of placing a weaken for 3 turns. The third hit heals this champion by 4% of her max HP for every debuff on the target. So defense down, weaken, poisons, attack down. Now attack down is useless for unkillable teams, but poisons, defense down and weaken is actually huge. And considering that she actually hits with this skill, not just debuffs, she's actually almost able to catch up on damage with Draco with the right build. But that was Fane. Moving over to the next faction, guys. And we are at the Lizardman. Now, there's no secret when you heard me saying the #1 poisoner, of course, that's Draco. Is no one else to be able to compete with him in terms of damage, debuffs, and of course base stats. Just overall being an awesome champion. We have the A1 attacks 1 enemy, damage increases by 10% for each debuff on the target. Once the poison bar is full on the clan boss, he deals tons and tons of damage with the A1. Then attacks 4 times at random. Each hit places a 5% poison debuff for 3 turns, and that's on a 3 turn cooldown. Sorry, badass. And we have defense down and weaken on a 3 turn cooldown as well. The aura increases accuracy in faction creeps by 50. Dracomorph, the #1 poisoner, damage dealer, defense down and weaken. He's just a true monster, guys. I love Dracomorph, one of my favorite champions. He actually was my most used champion in the entire game for the 2 years recap. Then from this faction, I'm just gonna give him a shout out. I really don't feel like he's a top notch because of his super low chances. We have Aox, attacks 1 enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance to place a poison. So he's very similar with Steel Skull. Now we get a bit of an extra heal from here, and then attack down on all enemies and decrease crit rate. And we have increases the duration of 2 random debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn when attacked. The aura is ally accuracy in Doom Tower. So with Aox, I feel like he's not as good as Steel Skull just because Steel Skull has the defense up and more heal as well. But on the A1 as poisoners, they're kind of like pretty equal. He does have better base stats on defense. So they're kind of pretty much in the same boat, honestly, him and Steel Skull. Moving over to the next faction, that's Ogrin Tribes. We have Occult Brawler, guys. One of the best poisoners in the entire game. Regardless if he's unkillable, non-unkillable, counter-attack team, non-counter-attack team, he is just amazing. He hits pretty good damage as well. He doesn't have insane base stats, but that doesn't mean that he cannot be used in any team. Epic champion, HP based, damage based on attack, attacks 1 enemy, has a 60% chance fully booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. The A2 right here is a wall of text. He's basically just dealing more damage if this happens or that happens. Nothing really to affect the clan boss. This skill right here can hit pretty hard though, but the passive. places a 2.5 poison debuff on this champion for 4 turns at the start of each turn. Has a 70% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on a random enemy for 4 turns at the start of each turn. Basically, poisons for 4 turns from his passive. If you're getting Master Hexer and Sniper on Masteries, which probably I would suggest you to get them with the Occult Brawler, more poisons from the A1, and to land them for more turns, I think is pretty amazing to be able to land so many poisons. He'll be dealing tons and tons of damage. I actually compared him with a few other epic champions and rare champions as poisoners in clan boss with unkillable teams, non-unkillable teams, and counter-attack teams, non-counter-attack teams, and they kind of equaled in damage, quite a lot of them, but he came at the top. Moving over to the next faction, guys. Now, he's a bit of a newish champion, to say like this, from the Barbarian, and is Farakin the Fat. I know he's not really considered a poisoner just because he has more important things on his kit, but he's an amazing poisoner as well. So Farakin the Fat, very good base stats, almost 1.1k defense. He's an attack based champion as well, right? Good amount of attack, decent amount of HP. We have the A1, attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a defense down for 2 turns. Then the A2, on 3 turn cooldown fully booked, attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance of placing HP burn and 2 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns. On a 3 turn cooldown, HP burn, poisons, defense down on the A1, and on the A3, places a 30% increased crit rate buff, a 30% increased crit damage buff on all allies except this champion for 3 turns. Then all allies except this champion will attack one target enemy. So that means ally attack and all the rest of the insane buffs on a 4 turn cooldown. The passive deflects 20% of all incoming damage this champion receives onto all allies. The damage will be spread equally across all allies. So basically, he'll be able to stay alive a bit longer because he spreads some of the damage he takes, moving it over to some higher defense champions, more tanky champions that can stay alive without a problem. Moving over to the next faction, guys, we have the Sacred Order. Now here as well, we do have some badass champions, right? But we're gonna start with one that probably you did not saw coming. So I'm just gonna give it a quick shout out, is Outlaw Monk. Early on, guys, if you picked your starter, maybe you haven't picked Kale, or you wanna have Kale as a campaign farmer, you can't really use him in a clan boss as a poisoner. Definitely considering leveling Outlaw Monk up to 40, 50 the maximum, because then you want to use him as a 5-star chicken once you progress more in the game. But he's a pretty good poisoner. Places 2 5% poison debuffs on the target for 2 turns. That's on a 3 turn cooldown. Decent base stats early on, like on normal hard clan bosses, till you put your hand on some better poisoners. But moving over to some serious damage dealers, in here we have Eotar. So he's just a badass champion. Super good for unkillable, for budget unkillables as well, he's even better. Base stats decent, 826 defense, not so good for Ultra Nightmare on a normal defense team unless you have a Valkyrie to keep the team alive with the shield, or a Brogni. Nowadays he's a pretty badass champion as well. But the A1 attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 25% chance of stealing one random buff from the target. So basically he can still attack up from the clan boss. The A2 Holy Flame, on a 3 turn cooldown fully booked, attacks 4 times at random. Each hit places a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. So I used to run Eotar back in the day on an unkillable team, right? And I used to have him with Giant Slayer. I used to have counter attack in the team, and this with the A1 and A2, all the attacks coming in, I felt like Giant Slayer was actually giving him a bigger damage, especially if you run him on the slow boy team with the Painkeeper. Having Giant Slayer on him is a must, just because you get to use the A2 so often, you know. The A3, apparently he's not using this on the clan boss anymore, which is good, because back in the day he used to use the skill. It doesn't really bring much, and increases ally attack in all battles by 21% as an aura. That's a pretty good aura. You can definitely run that on the clan boss. How I said, pretty good base stats on Eotar. Specialist for slow boy teams, to say like this, budget and killable. Then we do have one of the top poisoners right here, and that's Venus. I feel like at the moment her AI is a bit messed up, so I guess they're gonna fix that in the next patch, if I understood it right, which is probably in the next couple of days. She's Void Affinity. She's not only good in clan boss, she can do a ton of other things as well. Solo the dragon. Same, Battle Khazar can do it as well. I just forgot to mention that. But being Void and not worrying about getting weak hits and resisted because of that particular reason is absolutely amazing. The A1 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. We have the A2 attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of placing a defense down and weaken debuff for 2 turns. Then the A3 AoE HP burn, of course doesn't matter in the clan boss if it's AoE or not. And then we have this, which is only working if Cupidus is in the same team, removes all buffs from all enemies, has a 50% chance of granting an extra turn. So basically, if you're running her with Cupidus in clan boss, you could, maybe you will be doing some interesting thing in there, but Venus, poison, HP burn, defense down, and weaken. Now, if she wouldn't be Void, I would definitely say that Fane is better than her. I feel like she hits a bit harder, but Venus, she looks awesome. Her aura increases ally HP in all battles by 33%. We don't really care about high HP on a clan boss, honestly. Moving over to the next faction, guys. I feel like that's kind of like cover the poisoners on this faction. On High Elves, again, we don't really have anything that stands out as a good poisoner. She's decent early on, but pretty low base stats, low chance of placing poisons. We do have the ally attack. She's just meh. I used to use her as well in clan boss ages ago, but I wouldn't really suggest you to invest in her. Bannerlords. Now, she is actually getting another buff. So starting from the next couple of days, guys, you'll be seeing Rowan. This skill right here, on a 3-turn cooldown fully booked, attacks one enemy 4 times. Each hit has a 100% chance fully booked of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns after the patch drop. So probably in a couple of days, if not tomorrow, guys. Rowan, she'll be on the par with Eotar. I can definitely tell you that. The only part about her is that she's gonna be Void Affinity. So that makes her a bit better. The aura is for faction creeps, so that's not really gonna help us for clan boss. This skill right here attacks 3 times at random. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a stun. It's not really gonna help us on clan boss, but the A1 attacks one enemy, has a 70% chance of placing a heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. So I feel like this one right here is kind of like a meh in clan boss because we don't want to have heal reduction. I really wish they would remove this from clan boss. It shouldn't be landed on the clan boss as long as it doesn't affect the clan boss. Same with the other debuffs that are useless against the clan boss, like the decrease speed doesn't land on the clan boss because it doesn't work. Stun doesn't land because it doesn't work. I feel like heal reduction shouldn't land because it doesn't work. So I hope they're gonna approach that one at some point. But Rowan, I wish you would have had a double hit here, so a Giant Slayer would be a better option. But if you run her again, same like Eotar in a slow boy comp, definitely go Giant Slayer on her because you do have 2 skills that hit multiple times. So you have 7 hits from these 2 here, 8 hits. So you'll be using one of these skills pretty often, every second turn. So that would make her more viable for a Giant Slayer. The last champion that we have in the entire game as a decent poisoner, guys, is Richthof the Bold. Now, I don't own this champion personally. I haven't used him either personally on clan boss, but we have this skill right here, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit places a 5% poison debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. On a 3-turn cooldown, that looks pretty good, but then we have this, attacks one enemy, critical damage increases by 20% for each poison debuff on the target, stacks up to 100%. The A1 doesn't really do anything crazy on the clan boss. The aura as well is for faction creep, so it doesn't affect the clan boss. Decent base stats on the champion, 925 defense, fairly good. 1.4k attack, so I'm not sure how hard is this skill right here hitting on the clan boss. Maybe some of you guys can tell me that on the comments down below. I feel like, again, together with Rowan and Eotar, they're amazing for the slow boy teams. I don't see him as good for different sort of teams, but for that particular team, I feel like he can be a very powerful champion. Do let me know in the comments down below, guys. What do you think about these poisoners? Which one of them is your favorite from the ones you're using, of course? Which one is the most wanted rather than Draco? And Do let me know if I missed anyone. Hopefully I haven't. But appreciate all of you guys watching. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe for more content, turn on notifications to see when we upload next, and I'll see you all soon on another video. Till then, peace out.